did you know about Charles Hall and the Tall Whites?
Yeah.
And I've met Charles Hall, and he's a legitimate guy. He's really telling the truth, in my opinion. And when you drive down the 95, you're driving right by, according to him, Indian Wells and that whole area is where he was stationed to patrol. And it goes for quite a number of miles. And that was, I think, his home base was in the Indian Wells area.
His home base was... I've got a...
well, it's a military base. He had to report.
His home base was Indian Springs.
Right. So, come on, with all your travels, John, do you think that you've ever met an alien? I mean, don't you think you might have by now?
Oh, absolutely. 25% of the people on Earth are aliens.
Well, I agree with that. I agree. I think it's higher than that.
We humans are here on Earth for only one reason. The reason is to learn to live our lives with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed. And for some reason in our lifetime, and both you and I have lived hundreds of lifetimes, and for some reason in our last lifetime, we screwed up, and we're down here with everybody else that's screwed up, and the only difference between them and us is I'm telling you the reason we're here, and they don't know why people don't know why they're here, because that's not in the program. They don't tell them. You have to find it out by yourself. The Tall White story is absolutely true, and then Bill Hamilton came by here with his wife one day, and it was a Sunday night. He said, we're going up to Groom Lake, and we're going to just park by the black mailbox, and we're going to stay there until something happens. And I said, okay, well, when are you going to go back? He said, I'll be back Wednesday night. I said, okay, you want to drive by here when you come back? He said, yeah. So Monday night, he calls. I said, how's it going? He said, something strange happened. He says, I'll be there tomorrow night. We'll see. And I said, okay. So I went to school to learn regressive hypnosis. And I would have graduated, but I was so busy, I only had one more test to go. And when I had my Nevada license. But I got busy doing something and I didn't take it. But Angela, who taught the course, said that anytime you want to take it, you can do it. And I still don't know whether that's in effect or not. But anyway, Bill came back Tuesday night with his wife. And at that time we had a long couch there. I said, why don't you lie down there and put this pillow under your head. And I didn't hook up my recorder because I thought this is too far out, that nothing's going to come up for us. But his wife took notes. So immediately we got into it, and I said, where are you? And he said, I'm at the black mailbox. And I said, what do you see? And he said, I see two headlights. And he said, they're coming our way. And I said, okay, now what's happening? He said, they stopped overhead, and he said, I was on the driver's side with the door open, and I had my foot on the running board and my arm through the window, and he said, I'm being lifted up into this craft that it's about 50 feet above. And he said, I found myself on a comfortable couch, and there's what we know as a tall gray there. Tall gray said, what do you want? And Bill says, I don't understand. What do you mean, what do I want? He says, well, you're here. You came here to see us. You obviously had some questions. So he asked a few non-committal questions, and most of the stuff we've read about in the books. But, first of all, he said, what do you want? He says, my name is Qualar. And Bill spelled it Qualor, Qualar. And then they talked for maybe 10 minutes, and Qualar said, well, I've got to go. It's time to go. So if you wouldn't mind going back to the truck. So Bill says he walked over to the doorway, and he said he looked down 50 feet. He said, boy, that's a long way. He said, I don't think I could survive that. And Qualar said, no problem, just step off. So Bill took all his courage and stepped off and just floated down to the door. And then when he got to the doorway, he remembered looking behind and seeing the red lights of a truck going up that hill from where the mailbox is. He said, which is exactly what he remembered. And that was it.
Okay, but, Bill Hamilton, I've interviewed him, and he's a fascinating interview. It'd be great to connect with him again, but he's on and off. I guess he's been working for the man, so to speak, in various capacities, so I don't know if he's willing to do interviews now. But he told me that his wife was actually, I guess, abducted and messed with sexually by reptilians. Now, I don't know if anything happened to his wife in this particular trip, but they were visited on a repeated basis. In fact, it was so common or something that it became a problem for their marriage. He wrote about this.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember him telling me that story.
Yeah. So he was one of the few people that have ever come back out like that, talking about his wife and the reptilians. So what about the reptilians? Have you seen any of those?
I haven't, but the guy that's Resnick, do you know who Resnick is?
Yeah, the name's familiar.
He's with me and Ron, and supposedly we own all this moon property and are selling it. And I think Resnick was the one that said that he worked with a reptilian down in Florida in a laboratory. And he said the only difference that he could tell was that every once in a while he had an inner eyelid that would close and then open up. And he said it really freaked him out the first time he saw that. And he said every once in a while that inner eyelid would close and then open up. And other than that, I can't remember seeing anything, but most of my family has. For instance, Damien, when he was 11, he's 15 now. He came in one afternoon, it was summer, and it was in the evening, and he says, Grandpa, I just went to the moon. I said, cool, tell me about it. He said, I was up in my greenhouse, or in my treehouse, and he said, this green fog came in and started gushing around. And he said, the next thing I know, I'm on this silver slab in this laboratory. And I said, and of course, I never talked to him or any of my kids about this unless they asked specific questions. He said, I was on the silver slab and I the doctor told me to be calm. And I said, "Were you frightened?" First of all, I said, "What'd the doctor look like?" And he said, a few legs, hair all over. And later, I had him draw the picture of the doctor. So if you wouldn't mind, I'm not going to go over there, but if you go down about halfway on the left side, and you'll see a drawing of and it says, Damien's doctor.
You're kidding me. Right. Well, it sounded like that. Wow. That's really freaking scary. So, what did he say the doctor did to him?
I said, weren't you scared? I said, I'd be scared if I saw something like that working on me. He said, well, I was nervous, but not scared. And I said, what did he do to you? He said, I don't know. He said, the instruments that he was working with were flying around. Oh. And he said that he'd grab one and do something, let it go, and it'd fly off, and another one would fly in, and he'd grab it. And I said, this sounds like all the other stories I've heard. And I showed him pictures, that one famous picture of a reptilian that everybody has, and I had him thumb through it, and he stopped right there. He said, that's the guy.
That picture looks more like a spider being.
Yeah, more like a praying mantis. It could be a spider. Anyway.
One of those, I guess a praying mantis or a spider, yeah.
One of my daughters lived in Sun Valley, Idaho, and about, the daughter is 22 now, so this was when she was 7, so it had to be 15 years ago. No, because she was 3. So it had to be a long time ago. She always slept with her mother and slept in her mother's bed. And this one night, when she was 3 years old, they lived in Sun Valley in a house that was not surrounded by a bunch of houses, but, kind of by itself. And the little girl comes up to her mom and says, Mommy, I want to sleep in my room tonight. Moya, my daughter, was shocked because she had never heard her express any desire to stay in her, in her own room. But she said, okay, fine. Went in and made her bed. And at 5 o'clock in the morning, she comes in and yanks on her mother's covers and says, Mommy, wake up. I have something very important to tell you. 3 years old. Mm-mm. And Moya looks at her watch. It's 5 o'clock. I said, what is it? And she said, the space people came last night. And she had not talked to Alexandra at all about any space beings. So Moya says, well, how many were there? And she said 5. And she counted on her fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Wow.
So Moya said, what did you do then? And Alexandra said, I got my gun and shot him.
Really?
3 years old.
3 years old.
So,
wow. That's incredible.
4 years later, she's 7, and my 2 older daughters, which I had from my first wife, Moya and Jill, they're at the same house. They're in the living room, and it's in the afternoon, and they're just chatting. And they notice that it's been at least an hour and a half since they've seen Alexandra, and that's not like Alexandra to go away for that long, or for them not to notice. You know, they get checks every 5 minutes, whether they like it or not. And they heard the back door slam. And here comes Alexandra, and she has her camping backpack on with the straps here. And she has swimming goggles around her eyes, and a, what do they call the tube?
Yeah, I don't know what they call it.
The breathe air.
Yeah, I get it.
And she has a sheen, sweat across her forehead. And as they turn around and look at her, she's stomping towards the stairway, and she says, "I've just been to the moon, and I'm very, very tired, and I'm going up to sleep, going up to take a nap." And when I talk to my daughters these days about it, they just say, you know, that was very weird, Dad, you know, for her to say that. I'm going to take a nap. I've just been to the moon, I'm going to take a nap.
Now, how old was that little girl? Was she still 3 at that point?
No,
seven.
Then when she was 11, she was at my mother's house in Verdi, near Reno, and it's just a nice afternoon, and they just had lunch, and they were out, and there's a trampoline there, and Alexandra's bouncing up and down on the trampoline, and she says, "Mommy, when am I going to the moon next?"
Oh, man.
And, and that was, Molly said, "I don't know, darling." And then Allison, when she was 13, for some God-known reason, merrily let her put a deadbolt lock on her door. It was only open from the, inside. At about, I'm thinking it's like 11 o'clock, the most blood-curdling screams you have ever heard in your life.
Oh, my God.
Come out of Allison's room. Allison's screaming. And I flew out of bed and opened our door, and just down the hallway is her door, and tried her door, and the deadbolt was locked, and now she's screaming even louder. I mean, horrible screams. I can't remember if she was going "daddy, daddy," or just screams. I don't think she would have gone "daddy, daddy," because I would have gone nuts. But there was nothing we could do, and there's no way we could get in. And, I didn't want to go down and get a crash axe, because I wanted to stay there and, see what was going to happen. And pretty soon she quiets down. Oh, and also I couldn't get her to come to the door. And pretty soon she quiets down, and we get her to come to the door and get her all calmed down. And what were you screaming at? And she said, "A little man came out of my closet." And she described him, 3 or 4 feet tall. And to this day, if she comes, I'm going to have her describe it, because she'll never forget the clothes that he had on. They were plaid or something, but she'll never forget those for some reason. And got her all calmed down, and that was that. End of story.
She
No
didn't
more.
explain that. I mean, sounds like he did something to her if she would scream so loud.
The man?
Mm-hmm.
Could have, but I didn't want to ask.
You didn't even ask?
Uh-uh.
Wow. So she was fine otherwise. I mean, she just seemed normal after that?
Yeah.
Incredible.
She talks about it If you ask her about it these days, she talks normally about it. And she describes the clothes.
How old is she now?
40.
Oh, wow.
Wait, she was born in 73, so 83, 93,
That's
3, 47,
44.
40. God, she can't, 45? Is she that old?